It's 911. What's your emergency?
Help! Somebody please help me. There's an alligator attacking Emily.
Stay on the line. Help is on the way.
In the quiet coastal town of Willow Creek, South Carolina, where the marshlands stretched like a patchwork quilt under the heavy southern sky, the air carried the briny scent of the nearby Ashpoo River. Here, in a place where time seemed to move as slowly as the tide, Emily Carter was a name that stirred both admiration and whispers of concern. At 26, she was more than a resident of this sleepy town. She was its heartbeat, a young woman whose love for animals transformed her modest home into a sanctuary for the lost and broken. Her backyard, fringed by sawgrass and shaded by ancient live oaks, dripping with Spanish moss, was no ordinary suburban plot. It was a haven where injured herons found solace, orphaned raccoons rediscovered their spark, and a singular scaly resident named Brutus held a special place in her heart. This is the story of a woman who believed she could bridge the chasm between human and beast with love alone. A tale that begins with warmth and wonder, but ends in a chilling reminder of nature's untamed power. Emily's passion for animals wasn't just a hobby. It was the very rhythm of her existence. Born and raised in Willow Creek, she'd grown up wandering the marshes, her small hands scooping tadpoles from shallow pools and cradling fallen fledglings with a tenderness that belied her years. By 2014, at just 21, she'd transformed her childhood home, a weathered clapboard house with a wraparound porch, into a licensed wildlife rehabilitation center. The property buzzed with life, cages of chattering squirrels, pens of limping egrets, and a constant stream of volunteers who marveled at her skill. Neighbors called her the Critter Whisperer, a title she wore with a shy smile, her hazel eyes lighting up whenever she spoke of her charges. She'd coax a frightened possum from a storm drain, her voice soft as a lullaby, or spend sleepless nights nursing a hawk's shattered wing, her hands steady despite the exhaustion. To Emily, every creature was a story, every rescue a chance to mend what the world had broken. But no creature captured her heart quite like Brutus. It was June 2014 when she found him, a 6-inch alligator hatchling stranded on the muddy banks of the Ashpoo. The river's edge was alive with the drone of cicadas, the water glinting under a late afternoon sun. Emily, her boots sinking into the soft earth, spotted him, a tiny striped bundle chirping faintly, half submerged in the muck. His bulging eyes, wide with vulnerability, and his soft striped belly scales spoke of a creature unlikely to survive without a mother. Most would have backed away, their instincts screaming danger at the thought of those jaws, even in miniature. But Emily saw only a life in need. Kneeling, she scooped him into a soft cloth, her fingers gentle as if cradling a newborn. She named him Brutus, a nod to the strength she believed he'd grow into, and carried him home, her heart already tethered to the fragile creature. In her living room, Emily built Brutus a sanctuary, a large enclosure lined with smooth river rocks, a shallow pond shimmering under heat lamps, and a carefully curated diet of minced fish and ground poultry mixed with vitamins. She fed him by hand, tapping a spoon against the enclosure's edge to signal mealtime, her voice a soothing melody as she coaxed him to eat. "You're safe now, little guy," she'd whisper, watching his tiny jaws snap at the food with surprising ferocity. To her, he wasn't a predator in waiting. He was a promise, a testament to what care and trust could achieve. Friends marveled at the bond, though some voiced unease. "He's a gator, Em," her best friend Clara Tate would say, her brow furrowed over a cup of sweet tea on Emily's porch. "They don't love like we do." Emily would laugh, her hair catching the sunlight as she tossed it back, insisting Brutus was different. "He knows me," she'd say, her voice brimming with conviction. She secured a special wildlife permit, a legal allowance to keep Brutus indefinitely. And as he grew from a fragile hatchling to a 3-foot juvenile, her confidence only deepened. Her social media became a window into their world. Videos of Brutus nuzzling her hand, his eyes half closed as she scratched his snout. Photos of him floating beside her in the backyard pool, his movements slow and deliberate. Her followers, numbering in the tens of thousands, were enchanted, though some left comments tinged with fear. "Be careful, Emily. He's still a gator." Others called her a hero, a modern-day saint of the wild. She'd read the warnings, her lips pursing slightly, then post another clip of Brutus responding to her voice, his head tilting as if listening. "See?" she'd caption. "He's my family." By 2016, Brutus had outgrown his indoor enclosure. Emily converted her backyard pool, a kidney-shaped relic from the house's previous owners, into his domain. The pool, fringed by palmettos and sparkling under the South Carolina sun, became his kingdom. She'd float beside him, her laughter echoing as he glided past, his tail leaving gentle ripples. To her, these moments were proof of an unbreakable bond, a bridge between human and beast built on trust. But to wildlife officials who visited her property, they were red flags. Officer Daniel Hayes, a grizzled veteran with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, stood by the pool during a routine inspection, his arms crossed. "Alligators don't love Emily," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "They tolerate. Instinct always wins. You're playing with fire." Emily dismissed him with a smile, pointing to Brutus lounging by the pool's edge, his massive head resting near her bare feet as she read a book under a magnolia tree. "He knows me," she'd say, her voice defiant, her eyes daring him to argue. "He's not like other gators." For 3 years, this illusion held. Brutus grew, his body lengthening to nearly 7 feet by 2017. His scales gleaming like polished armor, his eyes hardening from the soft, blinking innocence of his hatchling days. Emily's home became a local legend, her story a mix of awe and apprehension. Neighbors would peer over fences, half expecting to see a monster, only to find Emily and Brutus in serene coexistence, her reading aloud, him basking in the sun. But beneath the surface of this idyllic sanctuary, nature was stirring, its ancient rhythms pulsing in Brutus's growing frame. The marshlands whispered their warning, but Emily, blinded by love, couldn't hear. August 17, 2017, dawned heavy with humidity, the kind of South Carolina summer day where the air clung to your skin like a second shirt. Emily Carter, 26, stepped onto her backyard patio, her worn tank top damp with sweat, a pool skimmer in one hand, and a bucket of cleaning supplies in the other. The pool, Brutus's shimmering domain, was clouded with algae, its surface dulled by the relentless heat. She planned to scrub it clean, a routine task she'd performed countless times over the past 3 years. Brutus floated near the shallow end, his eyes half submerged, his 7-foot body a dark, sinuous silhouette against the water's surface. To Emily, it was just another day with her companion, another chapter in their story of trust. But today, something was different, something primal, coiled, and ready to strike. Unbeknownst to Emily, Brutus had been fed an hour earlier, a hearty meal of whole mullet fish and chicken thighs tossed from a safe distance into the pool's deep end. His belly was full, but his instincts were restless, stirred by the lingering scent of blood and the confines of his territory. As Emily waded into the pool's shallow end, her movements confident, her sandals slapping against the concrete, Brutus shifted. His tail, a thick cord of muscle capable of toppling a grown man, twitched beneath the water, sending a subtle ripple across the surface. She dipped the skimmer, humming a tune from her childhood, oblivious to the tension coiling in the creature she called family. The air was still, the cicadas drone a distant hum, but in Brutus's ancient brain, a switch had flipped. Then in a heartbeat, the world shattered. Brutus surged forward, a blur of scales and power, his jaws snapping shut on Emily's left thigh with a force that could crush steel. The water exploded into chaos, her scream, a raw, guttural cry, piercing the humid air as Brutus initiated a death roll, a violent spinning maneuver designed to tear flesh and subdue prey. His body twisted with terrifying precision, dragging Emily toward the pool's deep end, her arms flailing as she clawed at the slick tiles, desperate for purchase. Blood bloomed in the water, turning it a sickly crimson as her screams grew ragged, choked by the waves that slapped her face. Brutus's eyes, cold and unyielding, showed no trace of the bond Emily had believed in, only the blank predatory focus of a creature obeying its nature. Next door, 62-year-old Margaret Maggie Tate was pruning her roses, her straw hat shielding her eyes from the sun, when the screams shattered the afternoon's calm. The shears clattered to the ground, her heart hammering as she stumbled toward the wooden fence separating her yard from Emily's. Peering over, she saw a scene of primal horror. Brutus, his massive jaws locked on Emily's leg, spinning violently in the pool's center. Emily's arms thrashed, her face breaking the surface only to be dragged down again, her screams now gurgles as water filled her mouth. Blood swirled in the churning water, mixing with sediment to form a murky, red-stained maelstrom. "Oh God, no!" Maggie cried, her hands trembling as she fumbled for her phone. Her voice cracked as she dialed 911, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "It's Emily Carter. The alligators got her. There's blood everywhere. Please, hurry!" The operator's voice was calm but urgent. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Help is coming. Is she conscious?" Maggie sobbed, her eyes fixed on the nightmare unfolding. "I don't know. She's screaming, but she's going under. It's pulling her down." Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, gathered at the fence, their faces pale with shock. A teenage boy, his bike abandoned on the grass, stared wide-eyed, his hands gripping the chain link. An elderly couple across the street clutched each other, whispering prayers. The pool churned, Brutus's tail lashing against the concrete, sending sprays of bloody water into the air. Emily's movements slowed, her body limp as the alligator's relentless strength overwhelmed her, her once vibrant energy draining with every spin. Within 6 minutes, the wail of sirens cut through Willow Creek's quiet streets. Paramedics and officers from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources stormed through Emily's gate, their faces grim under the weight of the scene. Wildlife officers, armed with long poles designed for handling dangerous animals, waded into the fray, shouting commands as they tried to separate Brutus from his prey. The alligator thrashed, his eyes glinting with cold defiance, his tail slamming against the pool's edge with bone-rattling force. Paramedics, their boots slipping on the wet concrete, reached Emily's motionless form, pulling her from the water with desperate urgency. Her body was pale, her left leg a mangled ruin of torn flesh, shattered bone, and deep, jagged lacerations. Blood pooled on the patio, mixing with the water that dripped from her soaked clothes. They worked frantically, their hands slick with red, but Emily's breathing was shallow, her pulse a faint flutter beneath their fingers. She was rushed to Willow Creek Medical Center, sirens screaming through the town's oak-lined streets. Trauma surgeons fought to save her, their faces set in grim determination as they battled the catastrophic injuries. Deep bite wounds, a femur snapped like kindling, and signs of drowning from repeated submersion. Machines beeped in the sterile operating room, their steady rhythm a stark contrast to the chaos of the afternoon. But the damage was too severe, the blood loss too great. At 5:47 p.m., in a room filled with the low hum of monitors and the stifled sobs of a nurse, Emily Carter was pronounced dead. The sanctuary she'd built, the trust she'd placed in a creature of the wild, had turned her backyard into a scene of unthinkable tragedy, a blood-stained monument to a love that could not tame nature's truth. The death of Emily Carter sent shockwaves through Willow Creek, a town where the rhythm of life was measured by the tides and the chatter of marsh birds. The news spread like wildfire, from the local diner where fishermen swapped stories to the church pews where Sunday prayers turned to murmurs of grief. Emily, the critter whisperer, the girl who'd once bandaged a squirrel's paw with the care of a mother, was gone, taken by the very creature she'd loved most. Candlelight vigils sprang up in the town's park, where mourners gathered under the stars, clutching photos of Emily, her smile radiant, her arms cradling a tiny Brutus when he was just a hatchling. Tears fell as the stories were shared, how she'd spent a week nursing an orphaned fawn with a bottle, how she'd stayed up until dawn to save a pelican tangled in fishing line. But alongside the grief was a growing unease, a question whispered in hushed tones. How could someone so attuned to animals misjudge one so fatally? Brutus, the once beloved alligator, was captured that evening by wildlife officers who moved with the precision of men who knew the stakes. Tranquilizer darts pierced his thick hide, his massive body still thrashing as they secured him with ropes and poles. Under South Carolina's strict protocols for captive animals involved in human fatalities, he was euthanized hours later, his 7-foot frame still and silent at last. The act closed a chapter that had begun with hope but ended in horror, leaving a community to grapple with its aftermath. The pool, once a shimmering stage for Emily's bond with Brutus, was drained the next day, its concrete stained with faint traces of blood that no amount of scrubbing could erase. The enclosure was dismantled, the palmettos cut back, and the backyard fell silent, a stark contrast to the life it had once held. Emily's death ignited a fierce debate that rippled far beyond Willow Creek. Her rehabilitation center, once a source of pride, became a cautionary tale, its gates locked and its sign weathered by the coastal winds. Sarah Jenkins, a colleague who'd worked alongside Emily for years, spoke at a memorial in the town square, her voice trembling as she addressed a crowd of mourners. "She loved Brutus like he was her child," Sarah said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "She saw him as family, not a predator. But we all warned her, me, the volunteers, the wildlife officers. You can't tame a gator's instincts. They're hardwired, ancient, stronger than any bond." Her words, broadcast on local news, fueled a growing call for stricter regulations on exotic pet ownership. Animal rights advocates flooded social media, their posts a mix of grief and outrage. "Alligators belong in the wild, not backyards," one activist wrote. Emily's love was real, but her trust was fatal. Dr. Rachel Simmons, a herpetologist from the University of South Carolina, appeared on a national news program, her tone somber as she dissected the tragedy. "Domestication is a fantasy with apex predators like alligators," she said, her hands folded tightly. "Their brains are wired for survival, food, territory, dominance, love, trust, affection. Those are human concepts, not reptilian ones." When Brutus reached adulthood, his instincts took over. Emily's presence in his space, especially after a feeding, was a trigger, not a comfort. She pointed to Brutus's earlier behaviors, hissing during feedings, tail slapping against the fence, lunging when Emily approached with food, as warning signs missed or dismissed. "Humans anthropomorphize these animals," she added, "seeing calmness where there's only conditioning. That's the danger." The tragedy reshaped Willow Creek in ways both visible and subtle. Neighbors who'd once admired Emily's courage now locked their gates, their eyes wary as they passed the Ashpoo's murky banks. Children were forbidden from playing near the river, their parents haunted by the image of Emily's final moments. Her social media, once a vibrant gallery of her bond with Brutus, was archived by her family, its videos now memorials rather than celebrations. Comments poured in, a tide of grief and warning. "She was so kind but so wrong," one user wrote. "Rest in peace, Emily, but let this be a lesson." Another posted, "I watched her videos and thought she was magic. Now I see she was playing with fire." Dr. Michael Vance, an animal behaviorist who'd consulted with the Department of Natural Resources, offered a chilling analysis of the attack's triggers. "Alligators are territorial by nature, especially after feeding," he explained in a radio interview. Emily entering the pool then, when Brutus was full but agitated, was like stepping into a lion's den during a hunt. His instincts saw her as an intruder, not a friend. The hissing, the tail slapping, the lunging we heard about in the months before, these were clear signs of a predator asserting dominance, not a pet showing affection. He paused, his voice heavy. "Humans see what they want to see, especially when love is involved." Emily's trust blinded her to a truth as old as time. Wild animals operate on instinct, not emotion. The community mourned, but it also learned. Schools held assemblies on wildlife safety, inviting rangers to speak to wide-eyed children about respecting nature's boundaries. Emily's rehabilitation center was taken over by Sarah Jenkins, who vowed to focus on rehabilitation and release, not lifelong captivity. "Emily taught us to love animals," Sarah said at a town meeting, her voice steady despite the tears. "But she also taught us to respect what they are. We won't keep predators here anymore." The center's new policies became a model for others across the state, a legacy born of loss. Emily's home, once alive with the chatter of animals and the splash of Brutus in the pool, stood quiet. The backyard, stripped of its enclosure, was now just a patch of grass, the pool covered with a tarp that fluttered in the coastal breeze. A small plaque was placed by the Ashpoo's banks, funded by donations from neighbors and followers. In memory of Emily Carter, whose love for the wild touched us all, may we learn from her light and her loss. It stood as a quiet sentinel, a reminder of a woman who gave everything to the creatures she loved and paid the ultimate price. Emily's story became a beacon for change, a sobering lesson that echoed far beyond South Carolina. It forced a reckoning with the allure and danger of exotic pets, a reminder that nature, no matter how nurtured, remains untamed. Her legacy lives in the animals she saved, the hearts she touched, and the stark truth her death imparted. Wild animals are not pets, and their instincts will always prevail. The marshlands of Willow Creek still whisper their secrets, but now they carry a warning. Love the wild, but never trust it to love you back. If this story grips you, subscribe, like, and share this video with friends. We bring you true wildlife stories that demand to be remembered, understood, and learned from. Respect the wild, and we'll see you in the next video.